Okay. Hi folks, Dr. Christopher Hobbs here with Nate Schwartz, homeopath, and I'm not an allopath, I'm an herbalist, that's for sure. And so we have behind us here Datura Stramonium, or the famous Datura plant, which is a shamanistic plant. And I talked a little bit about how it's used in herbal medicine or shamanistic use, and now Nate's going to talk about how it's used in homeopathy, which is pretty fascinating.
Yeah, of course, homeopathy is a science of medicine which is interested not necessarily in the primary effect of an herb, but its secondary effect. So, which is to say that you take a poison and then you have a very strong reaction to it, and that reaction is going to be very individual. But if we could use a very small amount of poison and control that reaction, we could cause a healing response. That's the basic idea. So with a Stramonium, Datura Stramonium, we use this to treat epilepsy, for example, because if people take large doses, they'll have something very similar to an epileptic fit. And it's not just any old epileptic fit, they'll have very specific symptoms, right down to do the eyes roll back, up to the left, up to the right, eyes go down, with consciousness, without consciousness, cramps start in the fingers and going up, and so on. So all those details from toxicology, we use that to get a match, like fingerprint, of the herb or poison with that symptom picture. We use Stramonium. I've used it to treat epilepsy. And we have, of course, a lot of different remedies. There's a lot of remedies that cause convulsions, a lot of poisons. One thing that's really special is in homeopathy, we also take the emotional state, the mental and emotional picture of the person. We take that into account, and that gives us a lot of individualization among all the different remedies that could come into play. And Stramonium, one of the old symptoms of Stramonium was when they're in a state of poisoning, they don't care what other people are doing and what other people want. They're really closed off, detached from the world. And the old symptom in the homeopathic literature is when you want to reach your hand out to help them, they just refuse. They say, "Leave me in peace. I'm not interested in you whatsoever." So I used that in a case of epilepsy. A young girl, about 10 years old, who had had epilepsy, petite mal, for years. And I went to see her and her family, and the thing that really I noticed about her, and I had given her, interestingly, belladonna, which was with the atropine, not too far off, but in homeopathy, it's all about that perfect match. And the thing I noticed about her is she didn't care that I was coming, that I was there, and that someone had taken all the trouble to come to see her. She didn't want to shake my hand. She didn't even look at me. So I thought, oh, we should really have a look at Stramonium. She got a dose of that, and she never had another convulsion again. So these are miracles of homeopathy and miracles of healing that happen through similars and through this wonderful plant.
And you were saying that maybe other types of highly dissociated people.
That's right, because that's another thing that's homeopathy is really, where you get really interested in it when you find out it covers mental and emotional states that we all experience, or especially children. Stramonium is a wonderful remedy for children who are then diagnosed with some kind of autistic spectrum, because they are dissociated from reality and they don't connect. You come up to them and say, "Hi, how are you doing?" They don't answer. Do they need to be put under heavy drugs, or do they need a dose of Stramonium? It does exactly the opposite of the poisoning. It will then connect a child or a person who's in a dissociated state with reality, with other people, allow them to feel, allow them to trust, and it will create that connection again.
Yes, and you know, the interesting thing is that if you take larger doses of Stramonium, it is actually very dissociative. So you just leave your body. Basically, Don Juan cited that quite a bit when he took it, and that is you kind of rise above and you see your body there, and so you're completely dissociated. So that's when you take higher doses.
Interesting. So there you go. The high potency in homeopathy will do exactly the opposite. It'll hit exactly that sweet spot where a polarity is out of control or out of balance. There's nothing wrong with being dissociated, or it could be in a shamanic context or in the right situation. The ability to disconnect can be powerful. In homeopathy, we say there is, in those polarities within ourselves, There is not the negative and the horrible side of it. It's just that it's one side of that polarity, the ability to associate and to engage. We need to have that just as well. And if we can learn both, people who are only on the engaging side, they'll also need to come back to the center because they can't detach, and they're in a state of what we call, over hypersensitive. They react to everything. So we can use these remedies to help people to find themselves, to balance themselves along that polarity.
And dissociation can actually be a survival mechanism, or a mechanism if you're in a lot of pain, psychological pain or whatever. You dissociate from the pain, dissociate from your surroundings and so forth.
And we use Stramonium also to, as it were, antidote experiences that people often have with all kinds of drugs that they take. You'll have a young person who maybe takes some kind of drug. They've heard this would be really cool, really interesting, or they have an interest in it. They take a drug that they're not prepared for. There's no set and
like LSD,
like LSD,
yeah.
set and setting. They're not prepared for it. There's no one taking care of them. They have a really bad experience, let's say, and that just keeps going and they get stuck. We use remedies like Stramonium as a so-called antidote to get them out of that dissociated state and to bring them back. I've experienced that many times, especially with young people who experiment with psychotropic substances that really knock them out and they're not able to come back.
And homeopathy, as an herbalist, I haven't dove really in deeply with homeopathy. I've always wondered, well, does it really work or not? But one thing I do know about it from hanging out with Nate here is that one of the greatest things about it, of all the different practices of medicine, whether it be the regulars, the more modern practitioners, so-called science-based, or just countryside herbalists, or whether it's phytotherapists or homeopaths. Homeopaths are the group of people, and it's the practice where you really go into the person's present condition and their history. That you really take the time and to sit with them and understand where they're coming from, what they're feeling, what they're experiencing, and also what their characteristics are. When to say, do you feel worse in the morning or the evening or whatever? So it's really the medicine of those common practices that really goes in deep and matches the medicine to the patient.
That's right. And I think that's one of the special contributions of homeopathy, is that Hahnemann said, we don't take any shortcuts. We don't simplify, and we don't put people into categories. And of course, that's a part of the human mind, and that creeps into all forms of observation, science, and medicine, putting people into categories, trying to make it simpler, putting on labels. Hahnemann says, no labels, no categories, no favorite medicines. Don't push your medicines on people. Maybe they don't need a medicine. Maybe they need something else. Treat the cause, and you remove the effects. So it's getting back to the origins, the true roots of all healing systems, if you ask me, that can take all kinds of different directions. Hahnemann reminds us of that, and he says, first physician, do no harm. He goes low and slow. And in that process of doing so, he found out that by doing the serial dilutions and succussions, the medicine was still working, and that shocked him. And he said himself, I don't believe it myself, but these are the clinical findings. It's working. So let's explore it. Let's find out. There are many things on this earth that we have not dreamt of, right?
Under the sun.
Under the sun that we have not dreamt
That's
of.
right. But when you consider herbal medicine, more traditional herbal medicine, like in traditional Chinese medicine, they do, a really well-seasoned and trained practitioner will go in deep and ask the person a lot of questions about their present condition, about their past symptoms, about their family even, and that's called asking questions, and that's really part of the diagnosis, besides looking at the tongue and feeling the pulse and asking about their diet and so forth. So a traditional medicine also is in a little bit more close to what we're talking about in homeopathy. But a lot of herbal practitioners, if they're like for instance, a community practitioner or whatever, and I'm not blaming anybody, but we tend, because of our conditioning, at least in North America, to kind of get into the sense of, valerian for sleep, ginger for digestion, chamomile for calming, and so forth. So that's more allopathic use of herbs. But I think ultimately it's always going to work better if we can match the herb or the very simple combination of 2 or 3 herbs to the patient's exact needs and present condition. And that's been my experience over the decades of a practitioner.
That's right. We have so much to learn from each other. You know, homeopathy, it grew out of eclectic medicine and botany. I mean, Hahnemann was a consummate botanist. He was a pharmacist. He knew exactly what he was doing when it came to plants and to minerals and all of these and poisons. And his mission was to get us to go deeper.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that many botanists do. But of course, all these different systems of medicine can get drawn into allopathic thinking, one-to-one, trying to get rid of symptoms instead of treating causes, and not taking the time to engage with patients and really give that space and time that's needed for a healing response to happen.
Right. Well, thanks for watching, everybody, and it's been a pleasure to discuss this with you, and more to come. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.